Welcome back to Neuroconversing Leadership, where we talk about effective communication in a neurodiverse world and workplace. I'm Jeremy Doran, and I love helping technical people make the leap to becoming great leaders. Are you funny? Do you know the 8 elements that trigger laughter? Should you use humor at work? These are all the things we're going to talk about today. When I'm recording this, it's less than 1 week to the 2024 presidential election. When this gets released, it'll be just after that. Are the two campaigns focused on the important issues right now? Is the news focused on demographics or swing states? Nope. The thing that I hear the most about right now is jokes. Well, one joke in particular by Tony Hinchcliffe at a political rally. While he was on a rant complaining about the state of the world, he actually said, "Did you know that there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now? I think it's called Puerto Rico." Boom. Even though many of them were laughing, a lot of them looked uncomfortable while laughing. And it got me thinking about the nature of comedy and what makes something a joke. What is a joke? And what makes it funny? And what makes them offensive? And when should you use them and when should you just avoid jokes? So in this episode, I'm going to talk about what triggers laughter in us humans. And there's actually some pretty interesting science behind it. We are also going to address the fact that just because something is going to get a laugh doesn't mean it should be said. As you can imagine, or maybe you've observed it, many people are outraged by Tony Hinchcliffe's joke. And it's pretty clear why. He basically denigrated an entire group of people. And what makes it worse is that's a group of people who have been discriminated against in the U.S. for a long time, which I've heard referred to as punching down. If you are making fun of a group that has been discriminated against or has extra hurdles that other people don't have, it's called punching down. If you're making fun of someone who has benefited from more privileges than most, that's called punching up. I don't think you should punch in either direction, but I suppose if you have to punch in one direction, you should punch up and not down. To make matters even worse, the origin of the joke is that during previous hurricanes, there was so much destruction and so much of the island was decimated that there was too much debris to actually dispose of properly. So there were piles of debris. And what he was effectively doing by calling it a floating island of garbage was mocking what was a tragedy where thousands of people died. Now, clearly, that was a political rally was the wrong time and place to tell any sort of joke like that. I don't think that joke should ever have been told anywhere. So what we're going to do, or we're going to talk about the jokes that should just never be told, but we're also going to talk about the time and place when jokes should be used or when they should be avoided. But first, let's take a look at what it is that actually makes people laugh. There's this article by Jerry Corley. He teaches seminars on comedy, so he knows what he's talking about. And I've read a number of other articles. There seem to be between 7 and 9 elements that make people laugh. I'm going with the 8 that seem confirmed by most people. They are in order: surprise, superiority, embarrassment, incongruity, recognition, release, ambivalence, and configurational. Now, I'm not going to explain all of them here, but I'm going to put some links of good articles in the show notes so that you can go and do some research on your own. As mentioned, as horrible as I think that joke was, many people did laugh. It turns out it contains 3 out of the top 4 elements that I listed above. So for the moment, try to forget how offensive it is, and let's talk about those elements. The first one is surprise. This is the element where you make the audience think you're going in one direction, and then you suddenly change and surprise them. He was talking about things that are wrong in the world, and then he mentioned a floating isle of garbage. In my mind, I immediately started thinking about recycling and waste and all of the garbage that has ended up in our oceans. And that is not the direction that he went. So there was the surprise. The superiority, that is basically putting down another group of people, and it is incredibly common. I know that when I was growing up, I heard a steady stream of jokes about Polish people, Jewish people, blondes, etc., all of which were putting down entire groups. And what it does, apparently, is make the listener feel superior. It may not be our finest human quality, but based on the number of jokes and the science, it shows that making a joke where you feel superior to another group is something that's built into us to trigger laughter. The third thing you had was incongruity. That is talking about two different topics as if they're the same thing, maybe using words that can have two different meanings, recognizing a dissonance in what was said and what was meant. All of those things can cause incongruity, and research shows those cause laughter. He might even have had 4 out of the top 4 because embarrassment is number 3. Normally, that is when a person telling the joke tells a story about something they did that was embarrassing to themselves, and the audience can kind of feel for them because they've either done it or can imagine doing it. In this case, he wasn't telling a story about something that was embarrassing, but he was living something that was embarrassing because that joke was cringy enough that I think people felt bad for him, and that can cause, even if it's nervous, a little bit of laughter. So now let's talk about where, when, and how to use humor at work or at home or in groups. That way we can all be funnier, but only when we're supposed to be. So when you're outside of work, if you're an actual comedian, of course. If you are with your group of friends at a bar or at a party and you're feeling especially funny that night, go for it. Because your friends are going to tell you when you're supposed to stop or that you're just not funny. If you are feeling nervous or uncomfortable and you're going to try and use a joke to help yourself feel less nervous, don't do it. Especially if you're the only one who's uncomfortable in a setting and you tell a joke, it's going to make you look even more uncomfortable. If you're doing it to ease tension for other people or give a break from an emotional topic, just be careful. If someone's just poured out their heart to you about something that is really bothering them, just hold off. If things are still heading downward or they're still at the bottom, humor's not going to help pull out of that. Once the conversation's kind of turned around and there is some hope or light or you've through the worst of it, then if there's a natural place and an obviously funny comment to make, that can help speed up the recovery, but just do so carefully and make sure the timing's right. If you're giving a speech like accepting an award or a toast or a wedding toast, these are not comedy sets. These are times for sincerity and speaking from the heart. Very often, humor is a good addition, but think of it as salt, not the whole meal. So make it so that humor is something that enhances the sincere and heartfelt things you're talking about, but never to replace it. How about at work? Humor is important at work. There's a good TED Talk by Andrew Tarvin. I'll include that link. He talks about how important humor is at work in order to help keep us happy and fulfilled and ultimately more productive. He also talks about the fact that humor is a skill. And if it's a skill, that means it can be practiced and developed. So I suggest watching that video and then reading some of the articles so that you can get better at being funny. He also talks about the fact that being funny at work does not replace being productive. On top of that, I would suggest that being funny at work should never be the first thing that you're known for. If that's the thing that people know you for, that makes you the class clown. And that's not ideal. They should know you for your excellence and almost be surprised by how funny you are. If you're so good at your job and you're funny, that is a wonderful combination that people will tell other people about. So go ahead and be funny, but don't go seeking people out at the water cooler just so you can tell new jokes to them. That's not what you want to be known for. If you're running a meeting, a little bit of humor is pretty good. It can help in many ways, but like a wedding speech, it's only to enhance the important message that you're trying to give. 2 ways in which I think it can help are releasing tension. Sometimes long meetings can just be filled with a lot of stress. There might be problems at work, And if that goes on too long, it can wear people out. A little break from the stress is welcome. But much like the personal conversations that I talked about before, it has to be timed right. Bad news can't be delivered as a punchline and shouldn't be anywhere close to it. It should be when people are on the path to hope to help speed that along. The other way is to help people stay engaged. People's minds tend to wander, especially in a meeting, because there are multiple people there. There are multiple agendas and topics, and not all of them might be relevant to you. So humor can be a good way to get people refocused on what you're saying. I listed the 8 elements, and surprise is number 1, and it's number 1 for a reason. It's probably the simplest way to get a laugh from the most people. It's certainly the easiest way to get the attention of people whose minds might be wandering. One way that I've seen this used more than once is a phrase that starts with, "I know what you're all thinking." And then the next thing is absolutely not what they're all thinking. It might be the opposite, or it might just be so out of the blue that it gets people laughing. Here's one I haven't tried yet. I'm going to let you try it if you want to, because if you do, I want to know how it goes. I want to be in a meeting where everyone's clearly thinking one thing, and I want to try this out. I know what you're all thinking right now. Are my shoes tied? I think it's going to kill, because that is going to be so out of the blue, it's going to make people laugh. Plus, I bet just out of reflex, half the people will look down at their own shoes to see if they're tied, and that's going to make them laugh. And half of those people are probably going to be wearing loafers or some shoes that don't even have laces, and that might make them laugh a third time. So I encourage you, try it out. But when you do, just let me know how it goes so that I can know whether I should use it or not. So what to avoid when telling jokes at work altogether? Avoid putting people down or even picking on people and their attributes. Now, most of us know this intuitively. The problem often comes when you pick on something that you think is a good attribute of a person, but they may not. Things like height, weight, appearance, mannerisms, you may look at them and think they're great, but it could be something the other person is really sensitive about. So just stay away from those things. Be very careful with it. Sarcasm and or very dry humor, which happen to be 2 of my favorite things. Not everyone's going to catch it, and not everyone's going to understand that it's a joke. I've had times, many times, where I've been face to face with one other person, and they didn't realize that I was telling a joke. I was even in high school working at an amusement park. I was in a booth with the same person for 2 full 9-hour days. So we had been talking for about 12 hours when he finally looked at me in surprise and he said, "Oh my God, you're funny." And my immediate monotone response was, "Yeah, I figured I'd try it out," which was my sarcastic way of letting him know that I'd been funny for the last 12 hours and he just finally caught on. And when I said that, he just kind of looked at me and wondered, I wonder if that's a joke too. So if that's one-on-one, imagine how much more difficult it is in a group to have everyone, or over email. Never use sarcasm over email or text. Forget it. You can think it and you can chuckle in your own mind, but keep it to yourself. Never send sarcasm over email or text. Puns, in my opinion, are always good. Much like sarcasm, though, not everyone's going to get them. The thing that makes them more okay than sarcasm is that even if people don't get it, you're not saying the opposite of what you actually mean, so it won't cause as much confusion. So there's usually no harm done. Of course, when they do get it, you're very likely to get an eye roll or a groan, even if they think it was funny. So just be ready for that. So to wrap up, humor is important, both at home and in the workplace. It can help in a lot of ways, and some people are more naturally funny than others, but it is a skill, so it can be worked on and it can be developed. If you want to put some effort in, personally, I think it's worth it. But it's also something to be careful with. You want to be careful that you aren't hurting someone's feelings, making jokes at inappropriate times, or detracting from the message that you really want to give. So check out the resources that I have in the show notes and start to pay attention to things that make you laugh and try to analyze why. If you do try out my "I know what you're all thinking" joke, please, please, please tell me how it goes. I want to find out. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Neuroconversant Leadership. I hope you're entertained while also learning a thing or two. Did this episode remind you of anyone? Do you think that person might appreciate this podcast? If so, please send them to my website, www.neuroconversantleadership.com, where they can listen to the episodes, or send them a link to whatever platform it is that you're listening to this on. Thanks again and have a great week.